Hello and welcome to Meet a Columban. I'm Father Jim Mulroney and I'm your host, and my guest for this episode is Father Bernard McDermott. Now, Bernie is a strange kind of character. He's a Columban from England, and there are not very many Columbans who came from England, but Bernie is one. He was ordained in 1974 and then took his first assignment in the Philippines. But after a few years in the Philippines, he was asked to move on, and he went to Taiwan and eventually found his way down to Australia for a few years. He's now living back in England, and Bernie would like to welcome you to Meet a Columban. And could you begin by telling us something of your time in the Philippines?
Well, Jim, thanks very much for the welcome. It's very good to be with you. Yes, I would regard my time in the Philippines, particularly during that first assignment, which was 4.5 years, as being one of the most privileged times of my life. I felt I hadn't really been formed in any positive way during my years in the seminary in Ireland. And when I got to the Philippines and assigned to a parish, despite the usual difficulties of culture and getting to know the language, it was a very transformative experience for me. Working among this lovely people, very poor, but very welcoming and very hospitable. So those first number of years were a very good experience. They left me in the one parish in that first 4.5 years because I started a health program to respond to the material needs of the people, the main need of which I saw was malnutrition. With so many young children dying, I felt that some response was necessary. So, I mean, I could go into that for a long time, but obviously time doesn't allow. But that took up a lot of my energy during those first few years in the Philippines.
I think as Columbans, we grow up several times. You grow up at home and you grow up in your first mission appointment. But you also had another opportunity to grow up when you had a second mission appointment in, I think, 1982. You were invited to go to what was then a fairly new mission in the society in Taiwan. And that was something you responded positively to. You decided to go. And I think maybe Taiwan was a more difficult assignment, perhaps because of the language than the Philippines. But how did you find your experience in Taiwan?
I think I had some sort of too high expectations of myself when I went to Taiwan, Jim. There wasn't any pressure on me to respond to the request to go to Taiwan. And so I felt I went with the full consent and knowledge of myself. But my expectations of language, I think, were too high. I think I was, 50 when I went to Taiwan, and it was difficult then to start a complete new language. And the expectation in the group in Taiwan at that time was to learn the two Chinese languages, Mandarin and the local Taiwanese language. And you had the choice, and I chose to, after advice, to learn Taiwanese. So I went to the language school in Taichung with Larry Barnett, and we took a course for about 12, 18 months to learn Taiwanese, after which I was assigned to a parish on the east coast of Taiwan to consolidate my limited knowledge of Taiwanese. But on the whole, I realized gradually that I hadn't reached the expectations of language which was necessary to be an effective and a happy missionary in Taiwan. So I took the decision really in end to review the whole thing myself and to wonder whether mission was a bit more than being an endurance test as it was at that time.
Did you have any particular experiences in Taiwan that led you to this, to ponder your viability in that country?
Yes, during my time, I was there for one particular Christmas, and I spent a lot of time composing a short homily for the Christmas Mass, the Midnight Mass, which was attended by about 15 people. At the end of which there wasn't a flicker of emotion from the people, whether they liked it or whether they understood what I'd said, etc., which was a little disheartening. The following day, I had to go to another, what was a Vincentian parish about an hour away, and a Chinese sister, Teresa, came with me. And we got to the parish to discover that the congregation was the grand total of three. Three old ladies were in the parish, plus a catechist, old catechist who had a Yamaha organ, which he played pressing every possible button as it was Christmas. So we had Silent Night to the rumba beat, which was rather unusual to say the least. Anyway, I proceeded with the Mass and said Mass in Taiwanese, and I repeated my short homily, thinking that the second time round, actually, it sounded a lot better. But again, not a flicker of emotion. And then on the way back to the parish after Mass, it was a terrible morning, by the way. It was raining and the windscreen wipers on the Jeep weren't working very well. And I wasn't feeling in the best of form. But Sister Teresa, next to me in the Jeep, was giggling to herself. And I rather testily said to her, "What are you laughing at?" And she said, "You'll never believe this, but two of the old ladies only spoke Mandarin. They didn't understand a word you were saying." And she said, and the third lady was stone deaf. So I could have said the Mass in English and it would have made the slightest difference. So I reflected on that thinking, well, the Lord was born into a world deaf to his coming, largely. So what was I complaining about with my three old ladies? But I think the deeper reflection was, Jim, that yes, I needed a little bit more fluency in Chinese language that I was obviously going to achieve. And it was the beginning of a process which led me to look at my whole presence in Taiwan and as to whether I should continue there.
Maybe the sister should have given you that advice on the way to that Mass instead of on the way back, right? It might have helped you quite a bit. Now, you did reconsider your presence in Taiwan and eventually decided it wasn't viable for you to continue there. What sort of process did you go through in your own mind in making that decision?
Well, yes, I think the different experiences convinced me that I wasn't going to be successful here or even happy. And at that time, the group had this process of review of life, which we met at the end of each month when people had the opportunity to share their feelings, their reservations, where they were at in terms of their ministry and presence in Taiwan. So I took the opportunity during that meeting to share my own reservations and my concerns about my limitations on getting the Chinese language. And I received a very sympathetic hearing. In fact, two of the group said we were going through the same thing and they were glad that I had mentioned that. Anyway, the result of all that was that I applied for reassignment from Taiwan, and it had the blessing and the support of the group there. So when that happened, I didn't feel guilty at all. And I felt that, yes, the group understood and supported me in the decision to seek reassignment from Taiwan. But it was an experience which I don't regret at all. I'm glad I had that. And it's an experience of leaving which I don't regret either.
I think we all have experiences which are fulfilling and good, and experiences that are frustrating and maybe even painful, but they all teach us something.
Yeah.
And they all teach us something which in a way becomes part of preparation for what comes next. Now, at this stage, you'd had two experiences, a positive one in the Philippines and maybe in many ways not such a positive one in Taiwan, although I'm sure there were many good things happened there too. Can you see on reflection any way that these two maybe conflicting experiences help to prepare you for the job that you're about to take on next?
Yes, I think so. Certainly, communication, I realized, was an essential part of being an effective missionary. And I'd like to think that I've used that experience then in the different challenges which I had, some of which were back home, assigned, first of all, on the vocations apostolate and working among young people, which I found very challenging, meeting with them. And then I got into administration, and I served as director in Britain. I was the first director from 1978 for the 4 years, which was an interesting and a challenging experience. But I felt I was able to draw on those experiences in the Philippines and in Taiwan, in a limited way, obviously, but it certainly, I felt it helped me to discover the sort of person that I had become as a result of those experiences.
Now, then you had the wonderful chance in your life to come to Australia. Maybe a little bit like the remittance boy that used to get sent out from England out to the colonies in the old days. But you came to Australia, you came to Melbourne, and you became quite a well-known figure around Columban circles in Melbourne. I think you travelled a lot and visited many parishes, and learned the bubbly, happy part of your personality in a positive way, which is still remembered, incidentally, among the Columban staff and priests that are down here. So how was Australia for you?
Yes, I think it was a positive experience. I think at the time I was developed asthma rather badly, and initially I was asked to go to Myanmar unofficially. If I've never got an assignment there, but I felt I couldn't respond to that because of the asthma and the lack of medical facilities which would have been available. And then on the scene came Trevor Trotter. And Trevor approached me and said, would I be interested in joining the mission education team in Australia for a while? And I thought that sounded a great opportunity. So I did. I responded positively to that. I think it was around the year 2007. And I went down and I was met at Melbourne Airport by Gary and Trevor, having been in Hong Kong and had met your good self and had a warm-up session in Hong Kong with yourself over a couple of evenings, went out, but which I appreciated very much. And then I arrived and joined the community in the mission centre there in Melbourne, and they made me feel very welcome. And Jim Fordham, wasn't it? Jim Foran. Foran then
was the manager of the office here for many years.
Manager of the office. And he gave me plenty of advice as to how to proceed. And I think fortunately at that time we were promoting in the Melbourne Archdiocese. So I had the opportunity, and because of my previous experience on the programme in Britain, that I embarked on the appeals programme in Melbourne. Initially, we had a little bit of a problem. In Britain, we used cards to ask people to take the Far East. And in Melbourne, it was more an envelope too. So it was combined as certainly asking for money, but at the same time asking people to take the magazine. So anyway, I complied with the method of promotion there eventually, and did travel extensively in the archdiocese, and met many different communities and different priests in the archdiocese, and enjoyed the experience very much. You know, I didn't really appreciate the multi-ethnic dimensions of the communities in many of the parishes, the Maltese, the Vietnamese in some parishes, but I was always made most welcome, and I really enjoyed the experience very much. And I have to say that yes, it was a great experience. And one regret I do have, I probably got involved too much, and as a result, really didn't take time out enough to experience and enjoy the rest of the culture and the geography of Australia. I never really went to well, I went to Brisbane much later on, but never really experienced Alice Springs and other places of great cultural interest in Australia due to my involvement in the program. And at the end of the 4 years, I was asked would I want to extend, but because of my age and I was wondering, my next move would be I think something and maybe a final move, and was that to be commit myself to Australia or to return home. So I took the decision then to return home in some capacity, but left with great memories and no regrets whatever during the 4 years that I was part of the mission ed team there in Melbourne.
Well, Bernie, you're a positive man, and you don't seem to have regrets about anything, either the good times or the more difficult times. You don't seem to regret any of them.
Yeah, that's. I think that's true. I think one reflects upon life and say, yeah, there were the ups and the downs can be as a learning experience. I think, as you said earlier, as much as the good times. And but to dwell on regrets and what could have been or what should have been, that's something I don't really experience or haven't really experienced. And I thank God that you know, that I've had these experiences and that the society has given me those opportunities. The one thing I do have now is, and to accept, I don't regret it at all, but I've realized that health is a very important dimension, particularly as one gets older, and being able to come to terms with the asthma and the limitations that gives me is something, again, has been a learning experience. Again, I don't regret, but I've accepted it, and thankful for the support and the different healing that I've received over the years, and it's been great. Yeah,
And I think you carry it very well. Anyway, Bernie, it's been great to talk with you, and thank you very much for giving us your time. And there's one question that we have to ask to an Englishman who came to live in Australia for a few years, and especially one who lived in Melbourne for a few years. Who did you barrack for?
Actually, it wasn't Essendon and it wasn't Collingwood. Yeah. Who did I barrack for? It was, I forget. Who did, oh dear, what's his name? Not West Coast.
I can see you were quite passionate about it anyway.
It didn't do me any damn good anyway, particularly on the tipping competition.
There's a lot of teams like that. But anyway, we've welcomed the English cricket team into Australia for the Ashes series this summer. So on your behalf, we wish them well, but not too well.
Thank you very much, Jim.
Okay, God bless you, Bernie, and thank you very much.
It's my pleasure. and love and regards to everybody there in Melbourne. Wish
Will
you
do.
all stay safe and keep well.
Thank you. I'm Jim Mulroney, and we'll be talking to Bernie McDermott in England.